All right. Hello, my name is Nicole Ruiz-Tagle, and I'm presenting today a social problem tied to theory. I'm from Shippensburg University in the Social Work and Gerontology graduate program, and this is for the human behavior in the social environment too. Today's social problem is going to be social media and bullying in adolescents. So yeah, let's get started. So today, I'm just going to start off with an overview of what social media is, and then followed by the overarching problem in society, clinical explanations, conflict theory, and any implications within the given theory that I'm presenting. So first we'll start off with what is social media bullying. To begin, social media bullying is just instead called cyberbullying. So before there was a time on the internet and with screen time use, there was traditional bullying, and this was portrayed in media and historical context where bullying was face to face, and many levels of bullying form from verbal to physical. And nowadays, we often see bullying occur behind screens, occurring in all ages of society. And it's just as common to see a 7-year-old online bullying as it is to see an adult bullying. So cyberbullying takes place online, as I mentioned before, and we see more prevalence and engagement, um, like in adolescent ages on platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, social media platforms, other than like those two, and then Snapchat, Twitter, and Facebook. And then each app has its own specialty and a source where kids are often engaging in maladaptive ways with each other. An example that I wanted to bring to light is one of very, very many cases, but very similar experience when a child faces bullying online. So I'm going to bring forth Caitlin, who is a 16-year-old girl who she oops, was cyberbullied online, and um she kind of just in the beginning goes over like what she experienced, and Dr. Frida, who is there with Dr. Phil, kind of gives in like a more in-depth explanation and experience of like what these kids also deal with. So,
Thing was going on just because of some small different behavioral changes. I didn't realize how bad it was though.
Yeah. I'm so passionate about the dangers of cyberbullying that I've even been asked to testify before Congress, calling for a federal crackdown on cyberbullying and dedicating money when they did a reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act. And today, the expansion of the internet has taken things to a whole new and potentially dangerous level, has it not, Dr. Friedman?
It absolutely has. And there are a couple of really key differences between bullying and cyberbullying. First of all, face-to-face bullying often happened at school, in the schoolyard, and during the daytime. Mm-hmm. Cyberbullying can happen at any time and in any place. This leaves the victim of that bullying feeling like there may not be an escape.
Right.
The second thing is cyberbullying can be anonymous. You may not know who's messaging you or texting you or posting these things. You literally may not know who you're being bullied by.
So how common is teen cyberbullying now?
Well, a 2017 study by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, showed that about 1 in 7 high school students were electronically bullied in the 12 months prior to the survey.
It's unbelievable. What are the effects that the research is showing?
Well, some of the negative effects include things like trouble concentrating, academic struggles, even avoiding or quitting school or other activities. Bullying also puts you at risk for an increase in anxiety, depression, sleep disturbances, substance use, and even suicidal thoughts. And Caitlin told us, teens, people who are being bullied may not want to talk about this to their parents or teachers. In some cases, they're ashamed. In other cases, they may be concerned that their internet or device privileges might be reduced or could be taken away completely.
Yeah. So,
Okay, so something that really stuck out with me that Dr. Frieda mentioned was um like cyberbullying can happen anywhere, anytime versus the traditional bullying that she explained. And I mentioned earlier is that it usually happened at school, so at least there was some sort of escape. But versus cyberbullying, there is no escape. It follows you home or wherever you go. So that was something eye-opening to hear. All right. So unfortunately, it's common that we hear about cyberbullying so much nowadays that it's normalized, and cases of cyberbullying gets brushed under the rug by the victim's family, possibly by schools or in higher officials, maybe, and etc. But so a study by Schoenfeld et al. In 2023 revealed rates of cyberbullying and suicide rates. And to and how they were different back then and now. I don't know the numbers of those, but based on the time that they gave those numbers, 14.9% adolescents have been cyberbullied and 13.6% attempted suicide. So the study also reviews legislation that governs cyberbullying and the ages in which the study and statistics aim at is from ages 10 to 19 years old. So that is like the common adolescent age. And something that came out from this study was the term cyber bullicide, which is basically cyberbullying and suicide mixed together. And this term developed because of the association that suicide is linked with, and many of the victims of bullying online. So those who are affected most are anyone who has access to those smartphones with accounts linked to social media. And along that population of those who have access to social media, is the age group in which they're at peak development. So we're talking about like the adolescent age because they're always taking in new information, different things like they're just learning about themselves. And yeah, so the consequences of adolescents experiencing cyberbullying, like Dr. Frieda mentioned, was depression, anxiety, and most severely suicidal ideation or completion. Um, and then she brings up at the very end that I showed you that some kids have this shame of not wanting to tell their parents and or teachers anything that's going on. And a lot of that leads to the fact of the fear of missing out, or FOMO, which I'll get into later on. Um, but that is another big part of the whole cyberbullying and not being able to disconnect those um, who are on social media and the ones that who shouldn't be on social media. So yeah. Unfortunately, it's common that oh wait. Next part of this theory, this starts off with some connection to the conflict theory, rooted from the work of Karl Marx and C. Wright Mills, um, another theorist who expanded more on the theory. This theory focuses on the power, inequality, and competition between society. So they also argue that the social structures and dynamics we see today are shaped because of the struggles across groups. So the struggles typically include finding control for limited sources like status, influence, or wealth. Um, and before, social media was quite literally platforms in which you could share your life and engage with others. But now social media has become a competitive hierarchy in which people are prioritizing likes, um, views, and follows. So, in order for them to gain some control. So, a tool, um, that is meant for maintaining power. And bullying has become that tool for maintaining that power. Online bullying can often reflect power struggles in which other people may have. So, for example, a kid with higher social status may mock or exclude another kid just to reinforce that hierarchy. So, it's as far as like the ones who may be targeted are the marginalized groups. So I'm talking about like LGBTQ plus youth, racial minorities, and students from lower social economic status groups or lower SES are often victims of cyberbullying. And then um, kind of to tie this together, a study from Purdy et al. In 2023 was published, and researchers examined the online experiences about cyberbullying among adolescents from lower SES in Europe. A total of over 2,600 students completed an online survey to describe any instances when they experienced a negative online event or witnessed or perpetrated against another person. So the analysis for this study was using what's called a four macro category inventory, where each subcategory is discussed for with the four W's. So the four W's include the who, where, what, why, and then for context, the what is the nature of the negative experience. So what was being said or done. And then the where is the platform that was used. The why was the motivation behind the negative behavior. The who was the identity involved. So this is mainly like the who who perpetrated against that person online. And then I don't know if I just said this, but the where, which public media, Instagram or Facebook, private, and we see private chats. So to me, I think of direct messaging or DM, and Facebook, like the Messenger app. So it really can be like the actual social media platform, but branched out into different areas of the social media platform. And then why? So what was the motive behind? Oh wait, I already said that. But yeah, so results found that the what category was offensive or malicious comments about someone else. Um, blackmail, sexual, like requesting sexual images or remarks, and grooming attempts. The where was public social media, such as the Facebook and Instagram private chats that I was telling you. And then the why was appearance-based motivation. So what they explained it was the look of someone, so how they looked, and they also mentioned how someone would smell. Um, racial, and disability motives. The who was strangers, members of a peer group, or I would probably consider like a friend group, an ex-partner, or a family member. So, based on this study, you can see how conflict theory very much applies to social media use and bullying. And in this case, this isn't even only the United States um, that is experiencing this, as the study explains. It's occurring in several European countries. So now we're kind of seeing like the gist of like what's going on about social media, like cyberbullying, and how they impact those marginalized groups. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that they were like in different social status, or SES groups. Um, so yeah. So the etiology or causes and other risk factors of social media and bullying, specifically among on why cyberbullying happens and escalates more online. So the first is adolescent development, and this is just an umbrella term for maturity level when referencing online behavior because adolescents influence is through identity formation and wanting that peer approval. So at this age, it's very common for people to bully others to gain that social status. And along with that, there's bystanders involved because of the group dynamics. And it kind of that plays into the development um, because those that are being bullied are possibly witnessing other bystanders and whether they attempt to help or not in a certain matter can alter that development as well. Um, the next factor is the incognito-ness and the anonymity. I can't say that word that well. Anonymity of being behind a screen. So um, everything's is hidden because it's on. You're talking to people on screens, and it's not in face to face. And this is a very large cause of cyberbullying. And as I mentioned before, smartphones and access to social media, um, like makes bullying more prevalent because of the content on these platforms. So, like I mentioned in the past, and Dr. Frieda said it's not face to face anymore as much. It still happens, but the bullying is getting more prevalent because it's constant screen times and constant engagement, whether it's maladaptive or not. So then we go into the social comparison and then the social status part. The social status is the environment where teens mainly who compare someone may they compare someone and themselves constantly. So this type of bullying is the type where someone may become a target because they're different. Especially since social media has more of a permanent digital footprint, it's a lot easier to become a victim by photo sharing things of other people. So, what I mean by this is instead of an event happening where, oh, someone tripped and fell, like, let's laugh at them, blah, blah, blah. Now we're seeing, okay, take out a phone, they tripped and fell, there's a video, now it's going around, and that person perpetrating against that specific victim now has control over that other person's status in this just general explanation. But so that's why it's another harmful engagement of social media in the social world. So and then the next one is the lack of adult supervision. Many teens will try to use social media in private or with no guidance, as Dr. Frieda said in that video, at the end of the video, because of the shame that they feel. Um, and because of generational trends and popular trends online, parents or teachers or other adults may not be able to understand the platform. So there's limited access of adults on the platform and therefore limited regulation. So because of this, there's eventually leads to bullying behavior and it's to be unseen and cause significant harm. But then we think about the ones case by case where some adults understand the trends. You know, some adults are very active on social media, but I don't think it accounts for every incidence where there's cyberbullying. So that's where the line is gray. But um and then the engagement of platforms. So platforms now like TikTok, Instagram, Facebook have algorithms set up so whenever a user engages in a specific post, similar posts will start to show up. So This could be harmful in terms of comparison because, for example, if a child is constantly liking photos or videos, reinforcing bullying behavior or maladaptive ways to respond to that behavior or bullying, that child's algorithm will show more videos like that. And um, sadly, pages just grow from this type of engagement. So nothing is usually ever done about it because, and that leads me to my next point, because they gain from that engagement. So that leads to the socioeconomic pressures. Um, Victims of bullies in a marginalized or lower SES background may not have access to resources like mental health help and are sometimes even exposed to already stressful environments. So, and then that bullying just adds another layer added to it. And another way that I think of it is students might not have, or not students, victims of cyberbullying might not have access to resources like mental health help, but they also may not have access to having those social media platforms. So that leads to more, it could lead to more bullying, cyberbullying, um, and also contribute with the fear of missing out or FOMO, which I will get into later. And, but yeah. So now that we know what risk factors occur, clinical explanations of the etiology that makes some of the adolescents more vulnerable are those with low self-esteem or someone who needs external validation. So those two go hand in hand. And as I said before, like needing likes and follows goes under that category too. The next is the maladaptive cognitive ruminations. Um, so rumination typically is someone who's constantly thinking of something like obsessively. So in this instance of the social problem, um, someone's like constantly obsessing over interactions online. And example that I feel comes up a lot is the the poor emotional regulation that also ties with this. Someone's mental health condition, so like getting more depression and anxiety. Someone posted on, let's say, Instagram, someone commented, a bully commented. Now that person that posted the post responded back, and they're ruminating in their head this engagement, like why did they post, like why, and then they're ruminating this entire um interaction until that next person responds, versus if it was a single incident where you're just going back and forth in person, it's harder, it's easier to self-regulate in that moment versus you're waiting for hours for a response. You're wondering who they're showing it to. It's just like a whole social dynamic and perspective that allows this rumination to prosper. So, and then, as I said in that example, the poor emotional regulation, it's a highlighted explanation due to the fact that phones are taking over social dynamics. So, where understanding and learning how to deal with emotions like shame, fear, and rejection is important, but instead, the youth is learning how to deal with it online. So, like I said with that example, um, they're not understanding how to verbally express it in a way where they're in social environments. Instead, they're figuring out how to create the most perfect response. They're sending screenshots to their friends. They're saying, what should I say? They're bullying then once again. Like, it's just too many instances of where bullying can occur. And then, um, so with that being said, I want to bring to light a study about emotional well-being of people before and after a cyberbullying event. So it's important to remember that these people were non-victims of cyberbullying, and the instruments used to record this were happiness indexes. I can't remember the name. Um, And then suicide risk assessments, the big five personality trait intervention, and the pretests were done. The design of the study was a pretest and then the intervention or the incident and then after the incident. So they would have a pretest and a post-test of these instruments. And then results showed in emotional well-being that survivors showed a reduction in overall happiness and positive emotions. And then the big five assessment included decreased agreeableness, extroversion, and conscientiousness, with an increase in neuroticism. So we're seeing a lot of decrease in positive emotions or traits, and then an increase in negative emotions and traits. So I wanted to present those findings because the emotional and personality aspects of the individual after the incident, which pertains to the clinical etiology of the social problem and the social media and bullying. So, okay. And then application of conflict theory to social problem. To rephrase conflict theory again, we're focusing on the aspects of power dynamic within society. So, as we've concluded, the main incentive for some, especially in adolescents, having social media is for validation. I can't say this for everyone, but you have social media to engage and get that interaction. So obviously, you want some positive reinforcement and positive validation. So platforms gain profit um, with that engagement. So whether it is negative or positive, that's another conflict within this theory. Is uh financial adjustments are always hard to come in contact because it circles back to that power dynamic. There's another aspect of society not being talked about within society, and that's the fear of missing out. And Hartanto et al. In 2025 investigated the effects of full and partial social media access and how the fear of missing out impacted overall well-being. As I mentioned in the previous slide, that's one of the many few things that happens. So, um, this study was a randomly assigned design with three groups. We have the first group, full abstinence of social media. The next group, um, partial abstinence, so partial use, partial abstinence, and then the control group had no changes of usage, so they just remained control. The data collection was monitored daily, checking anxiety, depression, and life satisfaction with those with the needed inventories. It wasn't said the ages of the participants, but there was a 280 participants who used social media regularly. And then within this study, the findings showed that the participants of full abstinence, meaning of full reduction of social media use, showed higher levels of FOMO during intervention week. So, with conflict theory, um, Marx argues that society is structured around unequal dynamics. So this would include the social status, the influence, the presence of social media, and one might include SES, the socioeconomic status. And then those who have limited access to social media may influence the study because it could just be something they're used to not engaging with or feel incredible levels of FOMO, leading to less power in a social settings when talking about adolescence. Oops. Um, and I thought that was interesting because um, in a lot of the studies that I brought together, it didn't have mention of FOMO and what that would do, which as you get older and, in your adolescent years, high school years, that FOMO is very prevalent. So I wanted to bring forth that study. And then the critical assessment of theory. So the critical assessment for this theory for strengths in this problem start off with the understanding that bullying is a tool used for power. There is competition for attention and social hierarchy. However, knowing that it means that people get hurt, um, that I kind of look at it as like a little pyramid, hierarchy pyramid, and the person who's at the top of the social pyramid has that understanding of power and inequality in a way that like they know if I shame others and um bully others, um my social status gets higher versus if someone's at the bottom of the social pyramid, hierarchy pyramid, um they're the ones getting hurt from that. So therefore this dynamic is kind of problematic. Um, so, and then in recent studies, in events that marginalized students are targeted. Now we see why because of this understanding of the power and inequality. So the next steps and the advancements are to advocate for those groups, although it brings attention to a macro level, which is great. I also put that as like a caveat for this because of the way it disregards individual intervention. And that is the main con for this critical assessment. Another question that raised a flag for me was not talking about the kids who are not bullying. So what was the outcome from the risk factors for kids who don't bully, and why is that? So, what's the difference between the cyberbulliers and then the non, and what's going on between that comparison? And then the last study I wanted to close out with was about how celebrities online are seen as advocates for bullying, and the study explored over 1.2 million tweet posts that included bullying related words. And the purpose of the study was to see if celebrities, a lot of which the younger generation would follow, are portrayed in supportive roles and seen as advocates. I wanted to bring forth a study because I think it's important to remember that even though there's so much fabrication and inauthenticity online, um, there are still some positives. And here in this exploration of positive tweets, there's a good influence in advocacy on online and in a conflict theory perspective that um it can be celebrities can be a voice for others and victims of cyberbullying. So and that wraps up my social problem with the application of theory. And I hope that further research starts after this to open doors for advocacy and education in schools to teach safe social media use and policies to become more regulated on cyberbullying. With the vast amounts of studies and of the aftermaths of cyberbullying, and also considering how socially impacts a majority of a generation.